So if we're going to paraphrase this, we have 2 billion people coming in the next 35 years. We've always managed to keep on growing crops for those coming years, but now the big question is, are we going to do that again? Because we have some pretty huge problems there.
Yeah. Exactly.
And how is the fourth industrial revolution helping us with that?
Well, I think kind of the breakthroughs of the fourth industrial revolution kind of really sort of tailor-made for agriculture, basically.
Right.
I think maybe there's one more slide after this which might show just 3 of the areas, or perhaps not. If it doesn't come out, I can just explain that basically if you think of 3 of the big issues with farming, one issue is it uses a huge amount of water. So the remarkable statistic is that 70% of all freshwater abstractions globally are used in agriculture, an absolutely vast number.
Right.
So we have to think, okay, how can we make that intensity of water usage less? Obviously, one way is smart irrigation systems, which will benefit from kind of better data analytic technology, and sort of more prosaically, just better transportation of water in terms of the valves and pipes, making sure we don't have leakage on the way to the farm. Point 2, in terms of food waste, another remarkable statistic is that 1/3 of all food produced globally is wasted. Doesn't even make it onto the plate. It's wasted at some point in the production cycle. So how do we improve that? Well, as we'll get on to later on, there's all sorts of improvements we can get in terms of the whole food supply chain. But of course, farm level efficiency in terms of storage and things like that is one way to do that. And point 3, rising demand. We talked about the 10 billion people on the planet earlier. The UN estimates that global food production will have to increase 70% 70% by 2050. So obviously that far outstrips population growth because you've got rising wealth levels and rising standards of living.
The Chinese are eating
dietary change, more protein-based diets and things like that. So how do we do that? Well, we have to get much smarter with kind of the inputs, and hopefully we can, still press through some of these advantages. In terms of,
so are the agricultural companies changing? Are they leading the change? And which companies are doing that?
Well, I think there's probably a few of them around. I'd say kind of in terms of the changes that I've actually noticed, change 1 is probably more of an aesthetic thing, but most agricultural companies now brand themselves as digital companies. So rather than just being makers of tractors and harvesters, somewhere in their corporate slogan will be the word digital.
Right.
And you see this reflected in general industry as well. Sort of, I think GE is now called a digital change company or something like that. So embedding that word digital in kind of the sort of very fabric of what they do, I think, is one of them.
So let's look at an example. We have John Deere. I think there is that, or do you want to not go to John Deere yet?
Perhaps not. Yeah, I was just going to mention a couple of other things in terms of kind of the response. Just I think it's quite interesting in terms of how the landscape's changing. Point 2 would be that if you go to agricultural showcase events now, the big machinery makers really kind of de-emphasize their hardware offering and say, look, buy our tractor or combine harvester because of its software layer on top, because it can make you lots and lots of savings. So really kind of the value proposition that these agricultural companies are offering has gone from hardware to software, which is quite interesting.
And services maybe, is that the business model?
Potentially. And tying into that point 3, and perhaps most revolutionary of all, is the development of farm ecosystems. In terms of, if you think of the mobile phone space, you have 2 big platform ecosystems, Apple's iOS and Google's Android. Now, it's going to be an interesting development over the next few years to see whether one farm ecosystem, perhaps developed by Deere or someone like that, comes to dominate the space, or whether there's room for many to thrive.
So, so we have an iOS for the farm then?
Potentially.
Right.